Apache shapeshifters, the witch tradition that mirrored Navajo fear in Apache territories, documented witch practitioners transformed into owls and bears, spreading terror through sacred mountain lands. Long before anthropologists arrived with notebooks and recording equipment, the Apache people of the Southwestern Territories knew certain truths about the night. They understood that some individuals possessed knowledge that extended beyond the boundaries of ordinary human capability. They recognized that transformation was possible, that the line between human and animal could be crossed by those who learned specific techniques and performed particular rituals. This knowledge was not folklore. It was practical information that governed behavior, shaped community decisions, and sometimes determined who lived and who perished. The Apache territories stretched across what would become Arizona and New Mexico, encompassing mountain ranges, desert valleys, and canyon systems that held spiritual significance for generations. Within these landscapes, the Apache developed complex supernatural traditions that paralleled, but remained distinct from, those of their Navajo neighbors. While the two peoples spoke different languages and maintained separate cultural identities, both recognized the existence of practitioners who could transform their physical forms and move through darkness with intentions that ranged from healing to harm. The mountain spirits, known as Garn, occupied central positions in Apache ceremonial life. These supernatural entities inhabited specific territories, presiding over particular landscapes with power that demanded respect and proper ritual acknowledgement. Apache ceremonial practitioners learned to impersonate these spirits during healing rituals and protective ceremonies, wearing distinctive headdresses and body paint that transformed them into living representations of forces beyond human comprehension. The line between impersonation and actual transformation remained deliberately ambiguous in Apache tradition. The practitioners became the spirits during ceremonies, channeling genuine supernatural power through carefully maintained ritual protocols. But this same knowledge that enabled healing and protection could be turned toward darker purposes. The Apache witch tradition, documented through multiple independent sources across more than a century, described practitioners who used their understanding of transformation and supernatural manipulation to harm enemies, spread sickness, and create fear throughout communities. These individuals were understood not as mythological figures, but as real people who had acquired dangerous knowledge and chosen to employ it against their own communities. When anthropologist Maurice Opler arrived in Apache territories during the 1930s, he brought the same methodological rigor that Clyde Cluckhone would later apply to Navajo traditions. Opler conducted extended fieldwork with White Mountain and Chiricahua Apache communities, learning languages, participating in daily life, and documenting supernatural beliefs with careful attention to internal logic and cultural context. His landmark work, An Apache Lifeway, published in 1941, presented Apache witch traditions as coherent systems of belief with specific rules, identifiable practitioners, and documented social consequences. The transformation techniques described by Opler's Apache informants followed patterns distinct from Navajo skinwalker accounts, but shared fundamental characteristics. Apache witches were understood to transform primarily into owls and bears, creatures that held specific symbolic significance within Apache cosmology. The owl represented night vision, silent movement, and connection to death. The bear embodied raw physical power, territorial dominance, and the ability to move between worlds. Practitioners who mastered transformation into these forms gained their associated capabilities, becoming something more and less than human. The transformation process itself required specific ritual knowledge. Unlike the Navajo tradition, which emphasized the wearing of animal skins, Apache accounts focused more heavily on internal transformation achieved through ceremonial means that remained closely guarded secrets. What was documented was the outcome. Practitioners who could travel at night in animal form, who possessed knowledge of their victims' locations and vulnerabilities, who could spread sickness through supernatural means, that left no physical evidence. United States Army records from the Apache Wars period provide independent documentation of these beliefs from outside observers who had no stake in preserving or validating Apache traditions. Military officers stationed in Apache territories during the 1870s and 1880s recorded specific behavioral patterns within Apache communities that were driven by fear of supernatural practitioners. These accounts describe Apache individuals refusing to travel at certain times, avoiding specific locations after dark, and making decisions about camp placement based on protection from shape-shifting enemies. One Army physician stationed at Fort Apache documented a case in which an Apache man refused medical treatment for a serious injury because he believed his condition resulted from witch attack rather than physical trauma. The physician's frustration was evident in his report, but his documentation provides valuable evidence that these beliefs governed real behavior with life-and-death consequences. The injured man eventually passed away, his refusal to accept conventional treatment driven by certainty that his affliction came from supernatural sources that required supernatural countermeasures. The social consequences of witch accusations within Apache communities matched the seriousness documented in Navajo territories. Individuals identified as witches faced exile, violence, and execution. These were not casual accusations made lightly. They followed specific patterns of evidence gathering, involved consultation with ceremonial practitioners who possessed knowledge to identify supernatural manipulation, and resulted in community decisions that recognized the accused as genuine threats to collective survival. Opler documented specific cases in which Apache individuals were accused of witchcraft based on behavioral evidence, unexplained knowledge, and the pattern of misfortunes affecting their neighbors. In one account, a woman was accused after multiple children in her vicinity became ill with symptoms that defied conventional explanation. The timing of the illnesses, their severity, and their resistance to traditional healing methods created a pattern that community members recognized as evidence of supernatural attack. The woman's own behavior, including nocturnal movements and possession of materials associated with harmful magic, strengthened the accusation. She was eventually forced to leave the community, her departure understood as necessary for collective protection. The parallel development of shape-shifting witch traditions in both Apache and Navajo communities raises questions that extend beyond simple cultural borrowing. The two peoples maintained distinct languages, separate social structures, and different ceremonial systems. Yet both developed sophisticated traditions describing practitioners who could transform into animals, travel at night with harmful intent, and spread misfortune through supernatural means. The similarities suggest either ancient shared origins or independent responses to common experiences that demanded supernatural explanation. Apache counter-witchcraft procedures, documented by Opler and subsequent researchers, involved specific ceremonies designed to identify witches, neutralize their power, and protect communities from supernatural attack. These procedures required practitioners with specialized knowledge, materials gathered from specific locations, and rituals performed according to precise protocols. The ceremonies were understood as genuinely effective, not merely symbolic. They produced observable results that confirmed their validity within the Apache belief system. Protective substances played important roles in Apache counter-witchcraft. Certain plants, minerals, and animal materials provided protection when carried, worn, or placed in specific locations. The knowledge of which materials offered protection against which types of supernatural attack was itself specialized information passed down through generations and guarded carefully by those who possessed it. This knowledge represented genuine power within Apache communities, its effectiveness validated through experience and observation. The identification of accused witches followed investigative procedures that combined physical evidence, behavioral observation, and supernatural divination. Ceremonial practitioners used specific techniques to identify individuals responsible for unexplained misfortunes, illnesses, and deaths. These identifications carried serious consequences, but they were not arbitrary. They followed logical patterns within the Apache supernatural worldview, connecting specific practitioners to specific harms through chains of evidence that made sense within the cultural context. The Apache witch tradition continued to function as a living belief system well into the 20th century, adapting to changed circumstances while maintaining core elements. Even as Apache communities experienced displacement, military conflict, and forced cultural change, the witch tradition persisted as a framework for understanding misfortune, explaining the unexplainable, and maintaining social boundaries between acceptable and forbidden knowledge. The geographical distribution of shape-shifting witch traditions across multiple southwestern indigenous cultures suggests these beliefs reflect something more than isolated superstition. The consistency of core elements across different languages, different territories, and different cultural systems points toward either ancient shared origins or common experiences that demanded supernatural interpretation. The traditions served practical functions within their communities, providing frameworks for understanding illness, explaining death, and maintaining social order through the threat of supernatural consequences for antisocial behavior. Modern Apache communities continue to maintain aspects of these traditions, though documentation becomes more difficult as cultural protocols around discussing witchcraft remain strong. The traditions are not museum pieces preserved for anthropological study. They remain living beliefs that influence behavior, shape decisions, and provide frameworks for understanding experiences that fall outside conventional explanation. The Apache shape-shifting tradition stands as parallel evidence to the Navajo skinwalker accounts, extending the geographical and cultural range of transformation beliefs across the southwestern territories. The independent development of similar traditions in distinct cultures provides validation that these beliefs reflect genuine shared experiences rather than mere storytelling or cultural borrowing. The documentation by trained anthropologists, the independent confirmation in military records, and the continued vitality of the traditions within Apache communities all point toward phenomena that demand serious consideration beyond simple dismissal as superstition. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.